Are live and the recording started here. Welcome back to our Missoula Community Advisory Group. This is our 9th meeting, and it's been a little bit of a stretch since we've met, and so it's good to see everybody and get a chance to get back to it. Thanks to everyone here in the room, and thanks to all of you who are joining us virtually. I will share the presentation here and kind of walk you through what we're looking at today. The agenda for today is here. So just to kind of walk us through what we're talking about, we want to say welcome and thanks for being here. And we have a bit of kind of an icebreaker and way to catch up a little bit on where some of the things we're thinking about related to the project. And we'll spend a little time on that. And then we want to give a chance to revisit some of our old business items, and that includes where we left off at our last meeting. And that was continuing to focus on the initial code diagnostic findings that are coming out of that. So we want to make a point of revisiting that and also share out with this group on the upcoming release of that final document and report. So you can see how that's going to be structured and where we kind of tie back into that with this group. And then also to preview some of the upcoming conversations around that in the community. And then we also want to report back on some of the community events and engagement that we did last month in December around the growth policy and visioning with the community. And so we want to take a chance to just show you some of that and hear if you have any thoughts or if it seems to resonate with what you are thinking and hearing from your respective organizations. And then from there, our main focus today is around our new business item, which is the next round of near-term code amendments, which is getting close to going out to the public and going through the public approvals process. So we want to share out on that with this group to let you know what that includes, and then provide an update on that process so that for those of you that are interested, or that if you are if organizations that you work with are interested in participating in that process, that you know kind of where to plug in and how it's set up. And then of course we're interested in hearing feedback from this group on those amendments. So that's and then we want to close out just with a quick kind of preview of upcoming engagement in February that we're planning and want to give you a heads up on and be able to look at with you a bit. So that being that's what we're focusing on today. We want.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Before you get into your next item, I mean, everybody knows each other. I think we've done intros before and stuff like that, but we have a new person joining us today.
Okay.
So just kind of do an introduction for some folks that don't know Mary. So,
Okay,
yeah.
Sure. Mary, you want to introduce yourself?
sure. I'm Mary McCrae. I'm the Permits and Land Use Manager, so current planning group in CPDI.
Thanks. And Mary and her team, her team of staff have been intricately involved with helping to put together these amendments. And so Mary is really a good resource for us to have with us today as we look at those. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next thing, and what we wanted to start with today was kind of an icebreaker to help kind of usher in the new year. It was the last time we met was 2023. Now it's 2024. We're moving on through the project, and we've had and some time in between to maybe think about it. And so I just wanted to put this kind of as a reference on the board to remind us what the role of this group is in the project and our individual roles. No problem. And so this is just something to refer to through this. But what we were thinking is that we'd like to go around and just ask for each of you to to provide kind of a response to this question. And that is basically you were all asked to sit on this group and join this group to bring a unique perspective and represent a specific area of expertise, or in some cases, several areas of expertise and experience. So just as a kind of a reminder to each other in this group and also an opportunity for us to hear and check in, we're wondering if we can go around and kind of quickly share one thing that you and you think those that you represent would see as a success at the completion of this project.
Hey Ben, sorry, is
Yeah.
there a way to make the presentation full screen?
I think there is.
I can't see.
And I'm going to ask that just generally if people see someone join the meeting,
Yeah.
if you can call it out. Well, let's see, we go to, where do
So
we
you
go?
over to view
You,
and then focus on content. And then if you close out the participant list.
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks for that. So if anybody wants to jump in, you're welcome to raise your hand. Otherwise, maybe we'll kind of go around and one at a time. Any takers? And again, this is just kind of like a quick check-in on, for you and those you represent, what are you seeing as a success as an outcome of this project? I might start maybe going to the left if that's all right, Kat.
Sure.
You.
I think, so I work for the university, I run our basic needs office, I work with, sorry, my coffee is fighting, tickle my throat. So I work with a lot of housing insecure students and students on the verge of or exiting homelessness as well. And I think for me and for us, a success here would be seeing a much clearer path towards increased affordable housing stock and like lowercase a affordable housing versus like the HUD definition. A lot of my students can't get into capital A affordable housing, but still need a lot of help, and because of their income and being in college, cannot afford nearly anywhere to live here on their own. And I think all young renters would feel the same.
Thank you. We're gonna go around to Amy.
I'm Amy McQuilkin. I went to the University of Montana and 19 years ago opened my shop, Betty's Divine, which I would not have been able to do if I didn't own my house and was able to pull equity and had something to leverage. And at the time I was married to my husband, Matt McQuilkin. He opened Black Coffee using the same equity from the same house. So as we increasingly, have a community where people can't afford to buy homes, they also won't be able to make their dreams of entrepreneurship and business ownership a reality. And we're going to start losing all the Betty's Divines and the Black Coffees in the next generation. So my interest here is to, I would love to see people get into the housing market so that they can also become members of the community as Matt and I have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bob?
My name is Bob Giordano. I direct Missoula Institute for Sustainable Transportation, MIST. That includes Free Cycles Community Bike Program. We have a property over on South First Street. Success would be for us, our constituents, which we consider the whole community. But maybe we have a real more specific focus of people who enjoy and support walking and biking and less driving, more public transport, small, green, affordable homes, tiny homes. So success would be putting us on a path for a multimodal transportation system, not to increase average daily trips and vehicle miles traveled. If anything, reduce it over what it is today. I've been thinking a lot about low-rise density. It's a term I really like, and I worry that we're going to go too high, too dense. Although I think we could have about 50% more density in this whole community. We could go from 100,000 people to 200,000, and I think it could feel better than today. So I'm really interested in the density question and not losing some of the values and characteristics that I think we all love here. There is something I've been thinking about, and that is putting forward some proposals. For instance, a Missoula arterial street standard. one lane in each direction with a center turn lane and protected bike lanes on each side of the road with roundabouts as the default instead of stoplights. We've tracked a lot of data, and we've yet to have a confirmed injury at any roundabout in Missoula. There's about 15 of them. There's an injury at about every other day at a stoplight in Missoula. It's something we don't think about much as a society or community. That's our goal, is to get people thinking about how do we stay alive, how do we thrive. I'm wondering, so I'm glad there's questions on this. Is there going to be a place in this committee for this group and our expertises to bring forward maybe a very specific proposal? Or is that not the role? Is it more to be input on what's being put forward to us? And maybe that's part of this process. And I would request or desire that there are places along this process that we could have some robust discussions about new ways of doing business in the community.
Yeah, that's a good question. And my thought is to complete kind of going around, and then if we could circle back to questions that are coming up, that would, is that all right if we kind of?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that. Chris?
Chris Chitty, Hone Architects and Builders. I think success, it's a lot of things success could mean, but for me, from a builder's perspective, I think success looks like at the end of the process, we have available to us a significant number of an increase in options, development options available to us at all different levels of the size and economic spectrum in every neighborhood, that we significantly increase. And I'm leaving significant undefined, but that it's in, and that those projects have to be both regulatorily feasible and economically feasible, in order to make sure that they happen.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, I'm Thomas with All Nations Health Center. I think a success could look similar to what's been said already. Just want to see people housed and for people to be able to transport safely using all sorts of modes.
Cool. Thank you. I'm going to open up who's online here. Adam, can we pass it to you?
Yeah, thank you. A lot of great answers. I'm Adam Hertz. I'm a real estate developer and realtor. I definitely echo Amy's comments. I wouldn't be a real estate developer had Brittany and I not had the ability to buy a home 12 or 13 years ago and then eventually sell it and use that money to start doing some real estate development projects. And so success for me is other people having the opportunity to tap into home equity to start businesses and all the great things that come along with home ownership. But also as a developer, I kind of primarily focus on the rental side of things. I think it was referred to as the lowercase a affordable housing, where we're not subsidized housing, but definitely trying to hit those affordability price points. And so just looking for more opportunities to do that on the rental side for sure, which I think we've done a better job of in recent years at the city level, but it's been really challenging on the ownership side. So just looking, as Chris mentioned, looking for more opportunities for different product types and just more flexibility to really be able to build housing that's affordable for people to buy, not just to rent. So success to me would just be, kind of an echo of both Chris and Amy's answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Alan McCormick with Garlington Lotta Robinson. I primarily practice land use law. For me, success means a code that gels so well it's practically self-executing and the city council no longer has anything to do.
Sounds good to me. Brittany?
Hello from Seattle today. Brittany Palmer with NMCDC. We're an affordable housing developer, the capital A kind. But I would like to see the floor for what's allowed to be developed raised across the board across the city, and that capital A affordable housing sort of incentivized from there, from an already like raised bar of what can be developed. And the people that I interact with are really supportive of this, just because we're hoping to see more equity among the neighborhoods so that low income neighborhoods aren't disproportionately taking on all the new redevelopment, but rather each neighborhood is sort of experiencing its own fair share of change to support a growing community.
Thanks, Brittany. Brian, you're next.
Yeah, you bet. I'll just go with what Alan said, given my former city council role. I only say that half in jest. I think one thing that would be part of success is just a consistency, compatibility with the cities and the communities' energy and climate change policies and values. And then I think more importantly, it really resonates for me with what Chris Chitty said. I think, and what Brittany just mentioned, you know, I'm a North Sider. You walk the streets around here and you can see all kinds of different forms, levels of development, sizes of development. And I think there's a lot to learn from what's been allowed in this area, and some good lessons to be learned in this process, and then seeing that available more broadly through the community, so that there's greater equity and opportunity around the kind of development we've seen in this area more broadly across the community. Thanks.
Thank you. And Paul, you're our final contributor here.
All right, thank you very much. Paul Filicetti, Historic Preservation Architect. I'm also on the Historic Preservation Commission here in town. I think success is going to be integrating everything that everybody's talked about, that diversity of housing, affordability, public transportation, but within the precedent that we're maintaining the historic communities that make Missoula the unique place that we all love and the reason we all are here, so that that isn't lost. That's success.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Is there anyone else online that I'm missing? I don't see anybody, but oh, Ryan Salisbury. Go for it.
Hey there, I think someone else had their hand up before me. But anyway, success in my mind would be that we get to a point where we could navigate a major subdivision process in under a year without a rezoning effort. I think that's really important because if you think about a 200-unit apartment complex with no conditions of plat approval, that can be permitted in 6 to 9 months. I would guess in our current environment, it takes 2 to 3 years to get a rezoning, a preliminary plat, and a final plat navigated in order to create these owner-occupied homes. And the scales are definitely tipped in the favor of the rental market, in my opinion. And so it would be great for all aspects of affordability and developers, risk tolerance and those sorts of things to shorten the timelines on these. If we think about what's happened to interest rates in the last year, it is changing a lot of things and making even affordability even that much harder. And I also am seeing that our projects, the 250, 300 unit projects that were approved circa 05, 06 are not contemporary anymore. What worked in 05 and 06 isn't necessarily what works today. And so it would be nice to see regulations that would allow a developer to be nimble and flexible to adapt to times if we have another hiatus like the economic downturn. We saw very little single family home sales from 08 to 2014, 2015. And then we saw a surge, and you know, if you have that 3-year lead time, it's hard for our community to react. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tung.
Hi, thanks, Ben. Toon Pham, I'm with the Consolidated Planning Board. I hate to go last because there's been such great comments, and I agree with many of them. But success to me looks like a much more modern, streamlined code that really gets ahead of the growth that we're all anticipating. I feel like, and I see this quite a bit on the planning board, is that a lot of the discussion around growth is in many ways sort of anti-growth. People are sort of resistant to the fact that Missoula is growing, and I think the reality is that Missoula as a community has to plan for much more growth than we are even have today. I actually think that it's going to grow quite a bit, and rather than try to find out, I think we need to embrace it and have a code that has that flexibility of allowing for that growth, but also preserve the community in the ways that we want, that we feel is important, but also has a flexibility in the event that growth doesn't happen. I'd much rather plan for it in a way that is that we can be proud of, and if it doesn't happen, still have a community that we all enjoy. So, yeah, it's a tall order.
Well, thanks thanks everyone for sharing that. I think that's interesting and helpful for us all to be able to check in on this, and I think it makes some points and brings up some questions that we'll continue to be working through. I do want to circle back to Bob's question, and because I think it's probably something that others may wonder about, and I'd like to give my kind of response, and then just to kind of respond now, and if it's something that we need to kind of dedicate more time towards talking through further, we can do that too. But I think that generally, I think your question was whether this group is going to develop kind of specific proposals and I mean, and I forget how you phrased it exactly, but that whether this group is going to develop some substantive things to add into the process. Does that sound?
I think so. Or maybe, yeah, I'm just kind of thinking out loud to get the creative juices going. I mean, MIST has some proposals, and I'm wondering whether to bring them to this group, the long range transportation plan. A lot of times one group will say, well, it's not here. And another group says, well, it's not here. It's not here.
Yeah.
I'm like, where? Yeah. Is it good? A march in the streets? What's it got to be to make some of that change? And maybe this group comes up with one of the scenarios.
Yeah, I think that.
Sorry,
So,
I think
oh,
Adam
sure.
got
yeah.
kicked out of the meeting.
There we go. Yeah, so I'll just respond with my kind of initial response, and feel free anyone to chime in. And but I think that this group was set up to really be more of an advisory group that we use to help shape the things that are coming together through the project. And when it comes to more direct kind of substantive influence or impact on how that's looking like, I think our understanding would be that that's where you would want to work with your respective organizations or through your channels to plug into the official process, so that there are points along the way where there's going to be the drafts and the materials to kind of work on, comment on, respond to, bring your proposals to through that community-wide public process, and that would be part of your thinking in this group, is how to kind of, based on how you see things shaping up and where and when they are scheduled out over the project timeline, that you can be anticipating how to be prepping for that and ready to tie in at those points. So that's kind of my.
I think I see like one of the big differences too is this being the charge of this group and what we really need from this diverse representation is kind of to take that holistic look of the full project and make sure that we're not losing sight of those key goals and the puzzle pieces are kind of fitting together, and that your why, in terms of why you're sitting at the table, that we all just share, that your why is not getting lost in that process, but kind of digging into the technical details and nuances of like developing a new street type or doing those types of things that we're going to be having stakeholder groups in more technical venues to kind of dig into that as part of the broader our Missoula project. And we could tap into an ONCAG member to be a part of that process as well. But I think getting in the nitty gritty and the technical detail, I think would take a lot of time and capacity. And then I worry that this group wouldn't be able to kind of keep that high level look in terms of making sure everything's fitting together and we're keeping those values at the forefront. So I see that as like, we might need to tap into KEG members' expertise in some of those other areas and be like, hey, can you serve on this? Or we would really benefit from having you over here. But I don't see bringing all that into this group as effective, I guess. If that makes sense. Unless you've got like 20 hours a week for the next 12.
For the future of Missoula, yes.
Yeah.
Once in a 7 generation
Yeah.
opportunity. I mean, what comes to mind is, okay, someone could rally 100 people to submit comments on something, or you could bring what you think is a well thought out proposal and have it discussed here. And in today's society, a lot of it's you rally and you get postcards and it's this versus this. I'm not opposed to that. I think there's a lot of value in community energy.
Yeah.
But I also see that it's almost like a new day where we're all thinking hard about the details and how does housing, transport, everything else fit together.
Yeah.
And this is a really good group to have some of those discussions.
Yeah.
Versus 100 or 1,000 people saying, well, you all are saying that's good. Yeah, well, yeah, let's do it. Let's all fill out the cards. But if you need that for cover to say, look, we had 200 people say this, then that's legitimate too.
Well, I think we also though need to coordinate because this, the OMCAG is really advising our Missoula, but like our street standards live in our public works department. And there's this, aligned but separate process going on to update that. And so that's where I think like the experts in the field, Miss being one of those, it's like that the effective kind of juncture for me is like sitting down with the folks running the transportation project and our Missoula and maybe others and being like, I've got this proposal, how does it align? And because I think the KEG, and I don't want to speak for any members, but you've all got really different priorities. And so I think if we decide to drill in on one, we would want to make sure like we're not losing all those others, right? It's staying relevant to everyone in the room. Yeah.
I would just also add that if you stick around with the timeline that we have when we're bringing another conversation and being able to focus on the policy piece of it or focus on the relationship. We started a little bit of that with place type. It's going to be a series of future conversations too, where we will keep bringing into this group, I think, that alignment or that challenge and relationship of transportation and sustainability and housing and how we balance it all, both in policy and code. It's a big project between the growth policy work and the code work. So sticking around, staying with the pace of it, I think is going to be really beneficial. Yeah. So you might have ideas already on what you want to focus on, and bringing that into things like stakeholder groups or with other more specific asks, but also be ready for the time that we are in right now. And you might be ready for talking about the streetscape typology, but we're still at a place where we're talking about the alignment between forms and the benefits of all of that, or what's going to overall guide our direction that we take, and then move into the more specifics after we set the guiding standards or guiding directions.
It makes sense to me that honoring the pace is good, and also recognizing that there's other processes in the community that will influence the pace. And it's up to all of us to continue to engage with our organizations, constituents in the community to influence the pace.
And us.
Or the outcome or the process or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good question and a good conversation, and it's one we can continue. I think just to say for today, I think we're looking at this as kind of on the, more informal advisory, probably a higher level in some cases. But that there are, I mean, we're seeing an interest in having, knowing where to plug into kind of the more concrete kind of detail oriented side of the work also. And so that, I think that's something we're tracking. And it's also something we can use this space to talk about if it's not occurring here, where is it occurring or where should it occur? Or we have to kind of facilitate that.
Just a quick process question. We can meet with each other.
Mhm.
Are we under rules as far as
No.
quorums or too many people?
No, there's not. Yeah.
No, you can definitely meet with each other. It's not a formal board or commission under structure at the city of Missoula. We've also internally been talking about once we get to some of these really technical phases, that might be really interesting to some of you and you want to dig in, and others might be like, I want to stay high level. And so I think throughout this process too, there may be a need for us to schedule some work sessions. And it might be work sessions around like single home ownership that, Amy and Adam are really interested in, or around, like technical components or alignment with the public works manual and street typology. And so as we get into those, we can kind of identify like, oh, it'd be great to go deeper here and then offer it up like who's interested in going deeper.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for that question and that conversation. I think we're gonna move on here. Stop sharing my screen. There we go. So this is the point in our agenda when we do have time for public comment, just generally unrelated to the agenda items. So I want to open the space up and see if there's anyone in the room or online from the public who would want to make any comments today. Okay, not seeing now.
Does that include committee members?
No, this is a kind of beyond.
You guys get
You get to
full
talk.
reign for the whole meeting.
Okay, I'm gonna. So we're running a little behind time, so I'm gonna run through some of this pretty quickly and try to get us onto the new business item within 5 to 7 minutes. Does that sound doable? Okay, so just as a reminder, these the main kind of components that we've been looking at over the last 6 to 8 months in this group and related to phase 2 of the project. The equity and land use evaluation, the community form analysis, code audit, and then state law changes that occurred last year have played a prominent role as well. I just wanted to kind of lay that out with regard to how that's been into our conversations in this group. And so this just kind of lists out, and I can close the, this lays out when and in which meetings we've focused on different ones of these components. So just to say that this has been an ongoing conversation over the last half a year or so, and that this is will probably kind of continue to be the case, and that we're gonna look at something and then it might drop away for a bit and then come back again. That we bring it back to relate to what we're looking at farther down the line, and so. These have been ongoing conversations that, and a reminder that all of these meetings are recorded and available to look at on the project playlist on YouTube. And then we sent out a kind of a summary material ahead of this meeting that tries to kind of break out the basics of what's involved with each of these components that you can refer to. We left off at our last meeting kind of focusing on the code diagnostic work, and just as a review of that process, that involves a code and policy audit that looks at a variety of our development codes, analyzing current and historical data from permits, observing just the built condition of the city, code user interviews, including internal and external. And then a staff inventory and analysis of common code issues, prototype testing, and then all that is kind of going to be packaged together in what we're calling the code diagnostic. And as an overview, just the general framework for that, that auditing work is really trying to kind of break out our codes into a simple framework that looks at substance. How well do the codes implement the policies? Where is that alignment happening or not happening? Process, which looks at how well do the permit review and approval processes provide predictable, fair, and timely service, and then just the organization of the code. How is it written? How is it put together? How is it structured? Is it easy to navigate? And we spent our last kind of meeting looking at some of the initial findings from that work, and those are listed here, and we can look at this and answer any questions that you might have today on those if you'd like. But I do want to kind of look at next steps around this, what to anticipate both with regard to the code diagnostic and generally. So looking at the more or less over this winter, with regard, I'm going to focus on the code reform section there in the middle. The code diagnostic, we're aiming for a February 16th release publicly, and that's so just in a few weeks, and a chance for the public to see that and read it and respond to it. And then the next step following kind of the producing this code diagnostic, which is really kind of an existing conditions document, that is meant to lay out what do we have and what are the issues with our existing codes. The next step in this track of the project is to build on that with identifying and establishing what we're calling the guiding principles for code reform. And so that's a conversation that we want to have at our next meeting, is to look at what those are and get your feedback on that. And the goal of those is to use those to kind of anchor the project in what we're trying to achieve at kind of a high level with these principles before we dive into the technical work of the update. So that would look at going through some kind of an adoption process with our city council. And then related to, and then just to run through kind of some other things to be aware of on the growth policy update side of this work. We're looking at putting on community workshops next month in February that we'll talk a little bit about later, that are around that are going to feed into the scenario development, and then that's all headed towards establishing kind of these broader full community scenarios, which we'll be looking at over the next few months as well in this group. And then on the near-term code amendment side, which is what we're talking about today, we are scheduled to bring those to planning board March 5th, and that's kind of the beginning of the public adoption process. And then LUP, Land Use Planning Committee, the week after that, March 13th, with the final adoption date at the end of March or early April. So I know there's a lot, but just stop there. Any questions, Chris?
Can you give an example of what a guiding principle might be? I'm just trying to understand what that looks like.
I think it's something like make it simple. They're pretty basic. They're like kind of like the basic fundamental tenets of like what are we trying to achieve here, and what can we point back to when we're getting into kind of these complicated individual technical conversations or decision making around individual code updates themselves that we'll be able to refer back to and kind of help guide us.
It's kind of like a boiled down or a more concrete list of all the things we talked about when we started. Like if we don't have this at the end of this, we have failed. Like if it is not stupid, simple and graphic, like we have failed, right? So I think it's,
Is there any sort of like, at what point do you acknowledge that there are sort of trade-offs and that there might have to be a hierarchy of sort of priorities? Like, does that get sort of recorded in this?
I think that is a concurrent but kind of separate exercise. Yeah.
I think those will be reflected more in the scenarios, but I mean, I could see the guiding principles like sticking to essentially giving us a list of what we do want to prioritize, so that helps us make those trade-off decisions too.
Okay, moving on, I'm gonna pass it over to Emily here to
Okay.
give an update.
So I think last time we met, we mentioned that we had these 3 community workshops coming up and they were a hit. We, between 3 events that were held at different times on different days over the course of about a week, we reached about 100 or over 130 residents. So we had really great turnout and a wide representation of industries and residents and neighborhoods. And yeah, so just really generally the exercise that we had people do was to draw their neighborhoods. So that's an example of a map that someone drew, and then identify on the map either by like circling it or drawing it in a different color, the things that they loved. I chose this map because they drew hearts and it was so happy. And then in a different color, identify the things that they would want to see or change in their neighborhoods. And then we debriefed, and if you go to the next slide, Ben, took notes of everything that people included about what they loved and what they wanted to see or change. And this was a really helpful exercise in helping us understand like what people really value about their neighborhoods today and what people would value in the future. And unsurprisingly, a lot of the things that they love, or that a lot of the things that we heard people loved, are also the things that people want to see in their neighborhoods. So this is a very distilled down list, and we're still kind of working through quantifying the qualitative data, but just kind of a quick analysis gave us these 8 or 9 big themes that came up. So we heard a lot about like people love being able to interact with their neighbors, or like see people sitting on their porches and say hi, or people walking their dogs. We got a lot of comments about appreciating like old trees in their neighborhoods, or views, or access to trails, or really the natural environment is huge value to people. Ability to walk and live in your neighborhood came up a lot. Access to services and resources in the community, like, or in the neighborhoods, like schools, churches, utilities, things like that. And then along with that, access to amenities and being able to walk to their local coffee shop or different businesses in their neighborhoods. Access to housing was a big one too, but then a lot of people got into the details about design preferences, like having a yard or having like a kitchen face a backyard. That was a really specific one. Yeah, it just that accessibility again, and then environmental sustainability was a theme that came up. Yeah, the list about what people want to see or change was really not too different. Like access to that infrastructure and connectivity, more housing. Almost every table had that come up. Want to see more opportunities for environmental sustainability, more services and resources. Traffic and safety was a big theme that came up. So management of that and being able to feel safe navigating their neighborhoods. Again, that like opportunities for social connection, affordability, equity, public services, and yeah, that mix of local businesses. So still working on synthesizing all of this, but I think this gave us a really good foundation of information for us to work from to kind of dive into our growth policy and see what's appropriately represented or what's not appropriately represented in terms of what people value, and work on right sizing that.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah.
Any questions there or comments? Cool. All right, well, we're gonna move on to the new business item, which is to give an update on the upcoming package of code amendments. Is everybody doing okay? Do we need a chance to stand up or anything? Okay. Those of you online, you can stand up anytime you want to, of course. So we want to run through kind of give an update on this, just so you're generally aware of what it is and what it includes, and kind of also cue you into the process and what to expect there. So just as a reminder, we've talked about this project as ultimately, we're thinking back to the conversation earlier today, the the goal that we've been really expressing here is to align our codes with our policies. And along the way, we have also identified a goal to, in the near term, strategically update our codes to address, the urgent needs that we're seeing and facing and trying to address through this project. But in a way that supports our Missoula, the project, and also fits with existing policies. And then along with that, we also have a kind of slew of changes at the state level to state law related to land use that were passed at the legislature last year that were kind of inserted into this part of this conversation on this project that we've been needing to respond to as well. And so just as a reminder kind of what happened there, there were a variety of land use bills that were passed, and then also what's called the Montana Land Use and Planning Act, the MLUP. And so that's kind of a thing in itself, and that we have 3 years to respond to, and it is just kind of a broad, comprehensive change in land use law in itself. And then there's also kind of a slew or bevy of individual land use bills that were passed that went into effect sooner. So we kind of broke out our approach to how to respond to that by kind of coming up with this phased approach where we brought through round one of code amendments in October of last year, and that really kind of addressed the individual bills that went into effect early on, that went into effect last year. And then there were two main remaining zoning related bills that were to go into effect at the beginning of this year, and that was kind of what we identified in the phased approach is what we would focus on addressing, since they were kind of the bigger, more impactful bills that included the change to requiring the duplexes be permitted citywide, and then also some significant changes to ADU requirements to loosen those. So that's kind of what we built the second round of code amendments around. And then our understanding of this project is that we will respond to and comply with the Montana Land Use and Planning Act through completion of this project. That's our approach. And then right around the beginning of the year, there was kind of this lawsuit that was filed, and an injunction was put on the duplex and ADU bills. And so I'm going to pass it over to Aaron here to kind of talk about that and our response to that decision.
Yeah, so like cities across the state, we had to assess our ability to move ahead with implementing Senate Bill 323, the duplex bill, and 582, the ADU bill, without a state mandate. So the state mandate allowed us to move ahead with implementing those, regardless of whether it was in compliance with our growth policy, regardless of other planning that needed to occur around that. And so when the injunction was put into place, we really had to take a step back and look at, does our growth policy allow us to move ahead with this absent that mandate? And what we determined through pretty extensive analysis is the answer was both yes and no. So it allowed us to move ahead with duplexes by right in some neighborhoods across our community, and wouldn't provide us the kind of legal defensibility to move ahead in other neighborhoods in our community. And so when we looked at that, we saw some glaring inequities start to pop up right away. What we know, as Brittany spoke to, areas like Central Missoula, North Side, West Side, we could proceed with duplex by right in those neighborhoods. Other neighborhoods like parts of the Rattlesnake, Granite Creek, parts of the University District, we could not move ahead with it by right until we went through the growth policy amendment process, which is underway, and our growth policy and the future zoning map and the growth policy supported that. And so at this point in time, based on our commitments through the equity report to do no further harm in creating inequities in the community, doing it now would absolutely kind of fly in the face of that. And so Mayor Mayor Davis is really creating more of a plan to look at that through code reform and the broader process. So moving through the sequencing, as Lavelle pointed out, so we need to update our growth policy. And then once our growth policy is updated, it allows for that consideration of increasing low density, or I'm sorry, low scale multifamily in all neighborhoods, then we can move ahead with that conversation to do it. And so thankfully, it's not as big as a difference in our community as it is in others. Looking at our trajectory, where we're at, and Lavelle, do you want to speak to that, kind of the sequencing and the timing about how these bills were always considered to be temporary in nature?
Right, because they're standalone bills, they take effect, like those two were gonna in January. But we were already working towards an update of the growth policy and code alignment together. The particular larger bill, we call it, that SB 382, has a timeline on it that says we have to have that in place within 3 years. But actually, because of the process and the fact that we are already into that process and that commitment to work with SB 382, we're going to be able to get to that sooner than that timeline. And what that bill does is that there's a lot of reset. There's a way to go through with consideration of the data and localized emphasis to have the informed data, the consideration of things like the equity mapping, et cetera, to chart our path locally for what works here. And we don't know what that would be, but it might be more than that duplex bill ever wrote. It might be what that duplex bill wrote. There's a section of that bill that has a requirement that you have to comply with at least 5 of certain 14 items that are housing related. And it might be very much in alignment with what this particular bill was, but it might be a different tool that we use. So we will, through this process, be right sizing and finding the tools that are going to work best for here.
Yeah.
And there's a suite of different things in those options that take you to looking at fourplexes and sixplexes and multi-dwelling and parking coordinations and such. So I think that's gonna be the flow, because we were already working on growth policy to code reform.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking through, and we're going to get to those slides, but we're proposing some ADU relaxations regardless of not moving ahead with SB 582. And the reason we're doing that is, our current policies already support that. And so we're allowed to move some of those things forward already. Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, question being, can you move through this process completely agnostic of what the eventual judgment is going to be on the Maid lawsuit? And are there any concerns about precedent that could be set one way or the other, depending on how the ruling goes?
So, our thought is we will continue to move through the process. If somewhere down the line, whether that's in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, the injunction is lifted and we're ordered to immediately comply with those 2 bills, we'll immediately comply with those 2 bills. But I think we'll still carry forth with our planning effort and wherever we're at with that planning.
I don't know if this is part of your question, but that the lawsuit included SB 382. But that's not part of the injunction. But if for some reason 382 gets pulled into that, that would be.
I'm more concerned that if the lawsuit is actually upheld, like the precedent that sets, that if anybody can sue you at the drop of a hat.
So they can't under. So this is my understanding from our city attorney and others. So cities hold self-governing powers, and we can change our zoning code however we see fit, regardless of a state mandate. We just have to have done the work to defensively back that up. So if our growth policy amendments support all 14 of the options that we have to choose 5 from. We get to proceed with that regardless of what happens with the injunction and SB 382. We just have to go through the process locally and have done that work to make sure our growth policy, either as it exists today or in whatever future iteration aligns with SB 382. There's nothing preventing us from locally implementing everything in SB 382, even if that gets scratched from the books.
Are there any other?
Or beyond SB.
Or beyond, yeah, it's not a limiting force too,
Yeah.
which is interesting because some state regulations are, for instance, the state building code, like we have to adopt it, in some places we can't go further, but that's not the case with the zoning code as long as we've done the work from a planning perspective.
Are there any other questions about the injunction?
Are we saying that we can have the code zoning policy Missoula wants, regard, notwithstanding what the state does?
There are some, so for instance, this, if the legislation passes specific law that says we can't do something, which they've done with inclusionary zoning and a few other instances, then we can't proceed with that. But the state doesn't have to tell us we can do something, essentially, if that
And
makes
the
sense.
other big one that comes up there, comes up a lot is our ability to require, and I'm gonna need help making sure I get this right, but our ability to require things that would reduce energy or that affect energy use is limited by the state. So we're only kind of able to take an incentive approach to that rather than like a regulatory approach.
Building codes. Yeah.
Is there a list of things the state has said we can't address? Is there a simple list?
Very easy places. I would say, I mean, municipal zoning, I can share a little bit with you later if you want. There's a front section of the municipal code where a lot of the prohibitions land, but they're usually the ones that are more general to what they don't want the city to do. And then there's some in the municipal section too.
Yeah, there's a section of state code that, addresses powers denied, so all the things they've told us we can't regulate or govern, and then there are specific things without code. There are also contractual things that are managed, for instance, in the Landlord Tenant Act that prevents us from implementing rent control or other programs like that. And so some of those are pretty.
I think that there was one that said we can't do eminent domain for a recreational trail, single-use plastics.
Yeah.
Which is a little outside what we're talking about, but growth policy does address everything. We do, I think even our last growth policy did say something like, look at banning single-use plastics, and now as of right now, we can't do something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, just generally, what we do locally needs to be supported by our growth policy, but what we do locally also might be directed or restricted in some ways by state law.
As we create new code, there might be new directions and limitations that flow as a result of that. And so that is,
I do want to make a note just so make sure everyone knows that the slide here does have a link to the actual decision. So if you want to dive in or are interested, you can find that.
And that's the decision to have a preliminary injunction.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're gonna carry on here. This timeline is just to kind of make the point that is to situate this next round of code amendments within the general timeline of the overall project. So just to make the point that we're looking at, these code amendments going through in March, early April of this year, and then our goal with our Missoula project as a whole is to reach adoption for that project next winter, so end of 2024, early 2025. And then finally, just process related, this is to kind of set this group up or to run down kind of the details of the adoption process for these near-term code amendments. We updated LUP in September. We updated them again in December last year. And now, and on the staff end, we've been working on developing the amendments and writing the amendment changes. We anticipate the red line changes to go out for public comment early February. Ryan, I saw you had a question about that. So those are not available yet, but they will be available soon, just within the next week or so. And they'll be available on the website that's linked here at the bottom of the page. That's kind of the go-to resource for these for this work. So just to direct you to that. And then, like we said earlier, early planning board consideration or planning board consideration in early March, and then they'll start working its way through city council mid-March. So that's kind of the end of the process related piece of this. Any questions on that? And then if not, we'll jump into the amendments. All right, so just as a reminder, we had set up kind of sideboards for these amendments that included really building them around those two state bills, which we've had to pivot from. So that's, but we had also identified early on that we wanted to identify and expand, identify changes that we could make beyond those. So that's where our focus has been. We try to take a targeted approach here and to identify amendments that can stand alone. We wanted to base them on steps from existing policy and previous engagement, and we're looking to not have unintended consequences, especially on our Missoula project workflow. And we really, we're looking at improving administrative processes for clear rules and understanding along with this. And one of the ways that we've been talking about this is, related to kind of the fundamental impetus for the Missoula project. We've presented it in this way that we need to improve on the city's and delivering on the city's mission to promote equitable, sustainable, and quality growth and development, and noting that the city's not adequately implementing the policies for our community's vision. And so we've for these changes have kind of translated those into looking for changes that could meet the urgency that we want to address and that they're needing to address, and also looking for potential process improvements. And so that urgency of meeting these state mandates has kind of fell away, but we still are looking at our housing issues and housing supply responsiveness, and then also kind of keeping an eye out for what near-term impacts or benefits could we try to provide for with these changes, because really these are going to be most effective over the next year until we kind of get to the end point of the full project and get that new code up and running. And then with regard to process improvements, we looked at really streamlining processes where we could, establishing greater clarity for code users, and then looking for necessary cleanup in some cases. This is the full list of what we're coming up with, and so I'm going to just run through these here and make a couple observations and any room for comments or questions, and then that's mainly what we have to share here. Again, we're dropping off on the injunction related items. So especially related to meeting that urgency and really related to housing and near-term impacts. We've identified this suite kind of amendments. I'm going to run through them one at a time here. So one is really looking at the improvements, looking to provide improvements to our existing affordable housing incentives. And basically, I'm going to run through these by looking at the urgency, what is the issues here, and then the benefits are listed in the bottom corner, and then the individual amendments are on the right-hand side. And let me just see, it looks like there's a question maybe, so I'm going to pause for just a second. Same one, okay, great. Okay, so
is this the list that Ryan's asking for?
This is kind of the general list. I think it sounded like he was asking for the specific code, the specific.
Kind of like a red line of the code that shows exactly what changes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that will all correspond to what we're running through here. But we're trying to keep it a little higher level here, not to get too into the weeds. But so we see an opportunity to improve kind of how we set up incentives for providing affordable housing and projects. So that's part of that is just simplifying how we define that. And right now, it's very kind of technically defined, and I think there's room here to make that a simpler, more flexible process to designate what that is. And then we also, currently in our zoning, offer bonuses to density for projects that do include affordable housing as part of the project, but it's pretty limited. So, and this is an opportunity to just jump on that and make some changes that open that up more. So that's both with regard to what type of building type that project can include, but also to the zoning districts that's would be allowed under. So another set of changes related to urgency, especially related to housing supply, is looking at incrementally loosening more of our regulations on to around ADUs. And this, goes back to our conversation around the injunction, and technically that bill is enjoined, but our ability to make these changes is still that's already a building type that we have. It's available in the zoning, and it's something that our community has had and been using for a while. And so, the changes that we're bringing through here, some of them do align with or match with what's prescribed in the bill, but they still make sense at a local level. So we see a value in still moving those forward or making these changes. So that includes expanding the, how big an ADU unit can be, and setting that, raising that maximum area of the unit itself up from what's currently 600 square feet to 1,000. So making it available to be just generally bigger, and raising the allowed height as well. So currently, the height of an ADU unit is capped generally to no more than the height of the existing building, if not lower than that. And this would match the allowed height to whatever the primary, what's called the primary dwelling is.
The base zoning district height.
Yeah, and so generally that's 30 feet or in some cases 45. We want to ease the location restrictions for ADUs. There's kind of a 10-foot separation requirement that exists currently between, where when I say the primary building, I mean like the house. Like typically this is something that happens on a property where there's a house, and then you would go in and potentially add a smaller ADU unit. And so this is allowing those two structures to potentially be closer to one another. And then looking at changes, and then just to call out that there are changes we made already as a community that were identified in that bill, like not requiring parking and not requiring owner occupancy and that kind of thing. So those are the ADU related changes we're looking at. Is there any questions on that? Keep seeing chats marked here. Okay. I'm going to ask Ashley, if you're on there, do you mind just giving a shout if you see any questions in the chat? That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Or just anybody online, just raise your hand and jump in. Okay, the next set of changes that we're making are related to the vertical mixed use building type that we had that exists in zoning. And this is a little technical, but it's also potentially a pretty impactful change, we think. Exciting, so we want to talk through that a little bit. A vertical mixed use building is basically a building that would include both, places housing and some level of commercial use. So typically, you'd have some storefronts or commercial space on the ground floor, or the street level, and then apartments above it. And the current definition kind of specifies, percentages for how much of each, you would need, and certain other standards. But the idea basically is that it's an urban type of building type that promotes kind of a more urban development pattern. And this building type currently is exempt from a density maximum. So it's not held to or limited to a specific amount of housing units. But we don't see this building type used very much. And it's something we've looked at previously in some of the prototype testing that the consultants have done, and in regarded to like what are the barriers to developing this kind of building type, and we put that in the past. But this is something that we've honed in on because I think there's an opportunity here in the near term for some of this development to occur or to be reach approval at least, and that could come with the considerable amount or a notable amount of housing that could be beneficial. So I'm gonna pass it over to Laval, if that's all right, to just kind of talk a little bit more about what went into developing this.
Sure, yeah. A couple of the components that's been mentioned are, with our typical standards, you have to meet septic or landscaping requirements, parking requirements. And so with the vertical mixed use, even though you have, you're exempt from density requirements, you still have to comply with all these other pieces, and it's still making it hard to pencil out. So we wanted to look at, and using the concept of urban characteristics in mind, we wanted to look at those particular standards in landscaping and parking to determine some relief for that building type and incentivize it even more. Where we're doing that is with the requirements related to general site landscaping, and with an idea of or a recommendation to exempt the requirement for the non-residential parking for that facility, because theoretically you would see them in places that are closer to multimodal systems, walkability, or at least adjacent to other commercial uses, and they can share on that or benefit from walking between spaces. So I think we're proposing that it's an option for the applicant to not have to provide the commercial component of parking required, but they would still have to provide the residential component. So going to the landscaping piece of this, maybe what I would do first off is also point out that where you see a vertical mixed use is in our commercial districts, and where you could see them if there were more incentives in commercial districts. And there's an extra layer of our code that is called design excellence, which is another place that has some additional requirements. And so trying to incentivize those particular places even more is a thing we would do. And that's like an extra layer of requirement and also guidance that's on these design excellence areas. So what we've decided to do or proposing is for places that are within some of those design excellence areas, we're recommending that we just waive the general site landscaping requirement entirely. And that's because those particular places are very much like a central business district. And in our central business district, we don't require this general site landscaping as well. So there's a lot of synergy or similarity to the thinking, I think, in those projects when they happen in some of those overlays. What the hook on general site landscaping is, it's a requirement to comply to establish like 15% of your parcel was landscaping and then provide trees for it. So, in places where we're really trying to encourage, bring your building right close to the street and other urban qualities, we want to feel like there's potentially some inconsistencies there. So we've been working with the Parks Department. We've been working internally to talk about how to still be true to some of the concepts of general site landscaping, like an environmental aspect. And that is in other places where you're not in that very more urban overlay spot, but you're still proposing a vertical mixed use. You could still waive the requirement for landscaping, but you would have to come up with another way of providing the trees that would have been missed. So that's been our way of thinking through the landscaping piece. We also want to make sure that if we're waiving a percentage of land requirement, that it doesn't turn around and become just another way to park more vehicles than what you were required. So we would include that into our draft of amendments also as a condition. You can't overpark your parcel, but what you could do instead actually is park less with this commercial option. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. We also tackled changing some of the calculations for the commercial component to simplify it and relate it not just to a parcel, but perhaps to, as an option, it could be a percentage related to the main floor area of the building too. Another way for an applicant to see and envision how they could use a commercial requirement. And that would be a choice of the applicant again, to be, deciding which way works best. And we are making some changes to the floor to ceiling requirements. So those are kind of the key things. And again, on premise, this is to help to emphasize the streetscape relationship to the building and the walkability in front of it. So there will be a condition if you use that general site waiver that you would have to develop a boulevard, make sure there's a boulevard or space wide enough for urban features like street landscaping, sidewalk movement, et cetera. So there's a few pieces embedded in that particular condition. Check it out. Offer up comments when we get it out there.
Thanks, Lavelle.
Sure.
Any questions on this one specifically?
Ryan's got his hand up.
Ryan?
Hey, just to clarify, it's clear this is mixed use buildings, but does that mean no changes to multifamily, like apartment complexes?
Yeah, this one would not include a change related to single purpose residential,
right,
kind of strictly multifamily.
Great, thank you.
Is that why you make the distinction between vertical and horizontal? Because those are too easily divided into standalone uses? Only because one of the challenges with vertical is that you're sort of stuck with either rental or condo, and the condo financing market has been more problematic. And so that's one of the reasons why it's been hard to make those kind of things pencil in the past. I hear that's changing.
Yeah, we've heard some exciting things about some of that shifting too.
It was taking a targeted approach to incentivize something we already had as an incentive, and to see it be explored more with the time frame that we have. And then there's still another mixed use option that is available to applicants that might be more horizontal, right?
And we knew too that there are a lot of changes that we need to make in the code that we then will need to kind of test on the ground, because a lot of it's hypothetical, right? We were like, we think this is going to make things pencil, and then we trial it and we figure out it's not quite right, we need to fix it. We actually have 3 vertical mixed use projects in pre-development right now, quite large ones that could bring up to 500 or 600 new rental homes to our market in the next couple of years, that we tested some of this on and worked with those development teams, and they're like, yes, this could really make this work. And so we had something that wasn't hypothetical that we actually could make a change now that might result in an immediate impact. And so that's why we kind of targeted this way.
And I'm just going to clarify in case it's needed, but vertical mixed use is a specific building type that we have in the code. So we already have parameters around it. That we're shifting.
And I think barriers to, apartment buildings specifically, or multi-dwelling buildings is something that I think we'll need to take more time on and kind of be a focus during the larger or longer stretch of the full project. That's my sense. Sorry, Aaron.
Well, I was just gonna say, I know we have quite a few more slides and we really only have about 5 more minutes.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if we should provide an opportunity to provide comment on those in another fashion.
Yeah, that sounds good. Let me maybe run through just to list out what's in here, and we did want to catch up on what's coming up in February for just a minute. So let's see where we can get, and I'll try to run through these in 3 minutes. With time for a few comments. So the other changes coming related to urgency include taking a couple relaxation to standards that exist in the zoning currently, but require what's called an administrative adjustment, which is kind of a quasi public approval process that's mainly administrative, but includes making available for public comment and kind of a higher level of staff review. And so there's a couple of these related to de minimis differences in parcel area and also reductions to parking requirements for locations near a frequent transit line that we think makes sense by right. And then finally, kind of related to this, we're also making changes in Title 16, which is our manufactured housing code. So this is outside of zoning. It's its own development code that the city has. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention for a while, and this is a chance to make some changes that we think are meaningful, that include, that will bring along implications for increased affordable residential infill. And also, address some longstanding equity issues around what's in the code currently related to the manufactured housing building type. So those are kind of that's the bucket of changes we're making that are kind of related to trying to meet some of this urgency that we feel. On the process improvement side, there are several other changes we're making. I'll just run through them here for the sake of time, but there's more detail on them in the PowerPoint that was shared out. But basically, the administrative adjustment changes, that's also a process improvement that streamlines something that currently is a more onerous process. There's a variety of recent zoning officer opinions that the department has determined, and that's basically an internal process where we're seeing a challenge with the code that's coming up through applications or projects, and where the language is vague or hard to understand or interpret. And so the department will specify what our approach or understanding of that is. And so, it's basically related to things that we've worked through internally already and think we've landed on, but they're not easily findable or easy to find for the user.
A single project has brought the issue to the forefront so they can take advantage of it, but if we incorporate it, then everybody gets to take advantage of it and they know where it is.
Yeah, and we have the list of what those include in this presentation. I can put them up if there's any questions about that. And then another change that we're doing is previously last year, we on an interim basis made changes to what uses are considered conditional. So that means, there's kind of directly permitted uses, there's directly unallowed, disallowed, unpermitted uses, and then there's what are called conditional, where you could do that use, but it involves a special approval from city council. And we relaxed a fair amount of those on an interim basis to try to meet some of the same goals here, to meet some of these urgency issues related to process for development review. And so that's been on an interim basis for a while. And so this is an opportunity for us to bring those over and make those changes permanent. And then again, also related to changes to Title 16 and related to reviews involving historic preservation permits, which is related to another one of those state bills. So I'll leave the summary report out at that. Are there any questions on any of these that you want to hear more about or dig into?
Or do you folks have general observations they want to share too?
Yeah.
I have a question, and I don't know if I'm using the right terminology to reference it, and maybe it's addressed in the parcel size, but would it become easier for, say, a homeowner to condo or split their existing lot and build, say, like an ADU, but it's actually something that is being sold and purchased rather than being rented?
Not expressly through these, and that's one. Yeah, that's a
That
more
would be the duplex.
difficult.
That's the duplex, that's considered duplexing?
Yeah, I mean sorry.
But yeah.
Ex- The accessory dwelling units they're expressly in relation to the other unit on the property. So that's kind of the what was exciting about the duplex bill and kind of what was a change is that it basically set us up to allow for an additional unit on beyond the single unit that the zoning currently allows for. And so that kind of is already allowed through this mechanism that's called an accessory dwelling unit. And the way that we, that's set up is that you kind of allow for this one more unit because it's accessory to the main one, and it's kind of smaller, and it fits the, it kind of doesn't have an outsized presence, or it's kind of understood to fit more into the general character of that single family neighborhood. And the duplex bill is kind of a different story because it's not necessarily under that same mechanism or that same understanding.
But to really accomplish ownership, you need to look at something like, you could be looking at something like a tent project.
Yeah.
And there's still a density look at the overall parcel size. But the adjustment on this parcel size, and Mary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the idea around, like, you're so close to the required parcel size that we're just gonna
for one more
right.
unit. Yeah.
It's at a 95% kind of metric. If you're 95% of that parcel size, you can add that other unit, or you can have the second unit.
Yeah,
which
is currently it requires, administrative adjustment, an application, a report, notification, a waiting period. Provide notice, and then we approve, and it's really just not, it's kind of unsatisfactory for the public and the developer, because they provide comment, but we approve it anyway because it's allowed.
And in this case, I guess what I'm referring to is almost like the existing homeowner becomes the developer and can sell it, and then add density, and then, people have the opportunity to buy a smaller, more realistically affordable and livable home.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different sections in our code that we need to address to make that type of small lot development or splitting of parcels and saleable units work. And those are big focuses of code. Yeah.
That's a great question. As usual, we have more to talk about than we have time for. I'm gonna move on from here, but we definitely want to hear any follow-up questions you have on what we shared today. We're happy to stay after and talk about them, or follow up through email. Emily, do you mind just running through the October engagement?
Sure, I'll keep this really brief, and we'll send out an update via email to you all, so that will have more specific information, but I just want to get it on your radars. The last week of February, and potentially one event the first week of March, we're holding our next public engagement cycle. And this will kind of move from, like, in December, we talked with people very generally, like, what do you love? What do you care about? What do you want to see? This is moving into, it's a game. It's going to be fun.
Awesome.
And it'll get people to think about, like, how do you prioritize the different things that you value? So kind of that trade-offs that you brought up before, Chris, but.
This is the game of zones.
We're still working out the rules of the goal, so TBD, but it's going to be housing related. So the objective of the game the objective of this exercise is to ask residents, how can Missoula allow a wider variety of housing types in existing neighborhoods in order to advance equity, affordability, and housing options that are consistent with our community's character. So people will kind of get options for different housing types. We'll learn where they're comfortable with placing those. We'll learn, like, I think, like, things like affordability, sustainability, equity, like, there will be different scores attached to it. So we kind of see what people are prioritizing. So more to come. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be really fun, and we have to see.
And I think we meet you all before that meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll remind you again, but certainly as the events come up, we encourage you to check it out and to pass on the word to your cohorts and your teams.
Is there a good like Instagram source for these kind of things?
We wish so much.
It's so much easier to share.
Yeah. So Ashley can maybe chime in. We have access to a few of the different Instagrams, like the Missoula Redevelopment Agency can share a lot of things for us.
Okay. But the city of Missoula or Engage Missoula, no.
Facebook, yes.
Different populations.
Work in progress. They do. I saw that. They have these posts.
Who does?
Yeah, Missoula County.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They do really good on Facebook.
There's
Yeah,
there's-
too.
They are sassy and I kind of love it. I think our social media presence is a work in progress, and Ashley and I are happy to rant about it anytime. But
It's just hard to share with a lot of people in the current
what we
form.
can do is when we kind of do a blast out to this group, if they're existing posts, we
That'd
can
be
make sure to
great.
link you to
That'd be
them. So
great.
yeah, we would love for you to share them.
Share content rather than create it yourself.
Yeah.
That's a great question. I'm just for the record, I'm closing down the meeting and turning off the recording, but definitely stick around and keep talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kat had a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
point. We do make graphics that can be shareable.